Hey guys, and welcome back to another installment of Dan's Pro Shop. Today, hopefully this will be quick and dirty, but I'm doing a project here and I figured I'd bring you along. Today, we are upgrading the front wheel and tire assembly on my 2014 Ultra Limited. These things come stock or factory with a 17-inch front wheel, and this is a 19-inch Enforcer off of a 2014 Street Glide. Got a screaming deal on this thing. However, the only problem is this is loaded with regular wheel bearings. They are non-ABS. However, my bike is ABS. So we need to switch out these wheel bearings to accept the ABS and the sensor. So we're going to do that today. It's not that big of a deal, but I figured I'd bring you along for it. So in case you're interested in doing this for yourself, save a heap of money not going to the dealer. Let's do this together and get into it. First things first, we're in the garage doing a side project. Get yourself a dad soda. Get ready for the project. So, like I briefly mentioned here, we are switching the factory non-ABS bearings for ABS bearings. Now, you can go to the dealership. You can have them do this. If you're uncomfortable doing it, by all means, do. If you are not comfortable doing this yourself, don't take the risk or the judgment of messing up your wheel or potentially worse. Only do this if you're comfortable with it, but I swear this is super simple as long as you have the correct tools. So I suppose we should go over that right quick. So fellas, what we got here, this is the most knockoff Amazon thing that you could possibly find. Yes, they make legit ones, they make OE ones, I think their Drag Specialty makes ones. Just think about it, anybody and their brother makes one of these kits. However, this guy I got off Amazon for like $36 or $38, and for what it does, it's going to be just fine. And don't worry, I will link this down in the description just in case you're interested in having this laying on the shelf. Like me, myself, personally, I actually have this other kit right here. This is made by Tusk. If you guys know off-road stuff, Rocky Mountain ATV, Tusk is like their brand. But this guy here, I primarily use for axle, swing arm, and wheel bearings for dirt bikes. And this is a slide hammer. It's a little more aggressive, dare I say. And this kit has some miles on it. So really, I really didn't need an excuse to buy a new one, but I did anyway. So back to the original here, this OMT. This guy is as straight, simple forward as you think it could be. This particular kit is made for bearing removal and install. So these guys right here are for removal. These pucks are for install. That's like the cool thing about this kit is that you can do both of them properly. So the way that this works is that you see these guys here, this little ring on the end goes in the ID of the bearing, will grip the inner race and remove the bearing that way. That way you are not destroying the innards, like the ID race in your wheel. This thing actually grabs the bearing. This is the way that it's supposed to be done. So now that we've gone over the tools that you need, huge list, that's it. This is all you need to do this job properly. Well, there is one more little thing that I'm going to add to this that you totally don't need whatsoever. This kit is fine by itself. It works. It does what it's supposed to. There's just one little thing that I'm going to add, and you'll see when we get there. So now that we've gone over the tools that you need, these are the parts. So if you're here, I know I sound like a broken record, but we're doing it here. This is a non-ABS bearing setup that I need to transform into an ABS bearing setup. So the biggest difference here is the ABS bearing itself is thicker than the regular non-ABS. And that's because there is a magnetic tone ring inside of that bearing. And that is how the ABS sensor picks up the front wheel speed. That's just the way that Harley does it. I don't know if it's like a great solution. I mean, it works. They've been doing it since 2014, so clearly it works. However, in order to do something like this, like if you have to change a wheel that doesn't have ABS bearings, you need to do it. But luckily, with this cheapo kit, it's super easy to do, and I promise you can do it. So these bearings here, like I mentioned, you can get them anywhere and everywhere. These are Drag Specialties I got from DennisKirk.com. Now, you can go on Amazon, you can do whatever. I mean, All Balls makes really good ones. Drag Specialty makes good ones. It's like SKF. there's a million different options. However, you go to the dealership, I want to say that these bearings are like $36 or $38 each. This kit from Jag Specialties and DennisKirk.com was $31.50 for both of them. And the part number for this kit is 123950. Now, I know there may be the Harley purists out there, the only thing that's going in my HD is HD. Well, come on, Drag Specialty's been around for a long time. Like, just, it's fine. I promise you. It's a good wheel bearing. It's worth it, but you save a little bit of coin not going with HD. Now, you guys saw me pull a little extra something out here at the beginning. This is an ID bearing spacer. For those of you that do not know, that's internal diameter. So these bearings, you have one going from either side of the bore on your wheel, right? So one side gets pressed in and seated up against a lip inside of the wheel, fine and dandy. This pipe or this spacer then gets inserted into the wheel. And the ID of this spacer is the OD, or the outer diameter of your axle. So the axle will go through this, goes into the wheel, and then this appropriately spaces the second bearing away from the first. Now, this isn't something that you absolutely need to do. However, I want to have these two wheels completely interchangeable and completely loaded, just sitting on the floor ready to go. The chances of me flipping them back and forth, let's be honest, slim to freaking none. But this way, I will be 100% sure that this wheel and that wheel just work. I won't have to change anything. Like, once I do this little bit of work, it just works. Now, I know I'm talking a lot. Let's actually get down to yanking the bearing. Now, I know we're talking again, but there is one more very important talking point whenever you're doing this. So if you are going from a non-ABS to an ABS bearing set, the rotation of your tire matters. I cannot stress this enough. Motorcycle tires, let's just say 98% of the time, are directional. So if you already have a wheel set up like this with a tire that's on it and balanced and whatever, and all you're doing is replacing the bearings, you have to 100% make sure that the ABS bearing goes on the correct side of the wheel for the rotation of the tire. So in this, for instance, the side that's facing up right now is the left side of the motorcycle, or whenever you're sitting on it, your left leg. This is the side that the ABS sensor is on because of the rotation of the tire here. You can tell by an arrow on the tire which way it's supposed to spin. So I know whenever this tire goes on the motorcycle, it's going to be like this, facing forward, and this is the left side. So I know for sure that this is the bearing location for the ABS bearing. Now to actually start doing things like I promised. So in this kit, there are multiple different ID puller tools. So you need to find the one that fits your bearing. So the way that this works is, you saw this little ridge that I mentioned earlier grips the ID of the bearing. Inside of this collar goes this weird looking wedge bolt. So you guys can tell here that there's a taper at the end of it. This gets inserted into the collar, and as this bolt is tightened up, it wedges out the ridge here that grips the ID of the bearing. So in order to do this correctly, you need to pre-assemble this part with everything that you need. Put two washers on top of this guy, and then a nut to retain it. Now, do not tighten this yet. Make sure that it's loose, because we need this to be collapsed to install. Simply push this into the bearing until it falls in. You will feel it clip into the right location. Now, once you have this guy installed where it's going to be, like whenever you pull it up, you'll feel it hit the inside of the bearing. This is where you want it. The next step here is we need to tighten that bolt that is on the inside of the puller. Now, you guys see here that there is a flat on the collar, a set of washers that we put together, and then a nut for the insert. We need to put a wrench on this flat on the collar and a wrench on this nut, tighten this thing, and pull it together. So I am using a 17mm open-end wrench to hold the big part, and then a 9/16 ratchet wrench to tighten the insert. Now this, you do not need to go crazy with. It just needs to be tight enough that the tool grips the inside of the bearing. Once everything's in there, we're good. Now that we have the insert part put together, this is the next guy that we need. This covers the hub and allows room for the bearing to be pulled out. A little bit of oil on the threads. Anytime you use a puller, always oil the threads. It just makes this thing last way longer. So we'll go ahead, put that on. So this is the way it's intended to be used in the kit. So once we have everything installed, again, my bad, I'm human. You know, no matter how many times you do something, you always forget to do something. We'll tighten this back up here again. Like I mentioned, doesn't have to be crazy, just has to be snug. Now we can crank down this bolt and pull the bearing. Now, once again, we're going to take our 17 mil and hold the stud so that doesn't spin. Grab yourself an 1 1/16 wrench. Hold the center part still. Twist the big one. This will effectively pull the bearing right out of the hub. Now, keep in mind, you are going to have to use some, some grunt for this. It's not hard, but you got to want to do it if that makes any sense. Oh, there we go. That pop is exactly what you're looking for. That is the bearing unseating from the hub. Once you get away with that original pop, the rest of it's pretty smooth sailing. And there we have it. We got ourselves one gently used Harley Davidson wheel bearing. Now, that being said, I strongly suggest that you guys do not reuse these bearings. I'll explain why. Now, the reason I say not to reuse these bearings, even if they're in good shape, well, just like what we have here, there's nothing wrong with them. I just needed to replace them because of the ABS thing. So the way that this tool works, now that you have it out, you can better see. Whenever this thing goes in here, the way that this insert grabs it is on the internal race. So all that forcing and yanking you just did was trying its best to separate this sealed bearing. Does it damage it? I would arguably say not really. But whenever it comes to something as cheap as a $15 wheel bearing that is literally the only thing between you and the road whenever you're on a $1,000 motor or £1,000-pound motorcycle, just throw this away and replace the bearing, trust me. Now, like I mentioned, I got this ID axle spacer, a replacement, but I am thinking they are exactly the same. Go ahead and grab us a digital micrometer here. Put this thing over in freedom units. So the one that I took out of it is 1.249, so 1.25 OD. The new one that I got, 1.2494. So yeah, 1.25 OD. Length, this is the big deal. So let's zero this thing out just to make sure. Because the overall length of this thing is what separates the spacing of the bearings on the inside of the wheel, which will be a big deal, which I'll explain here in a minute. But what I have for overall length on the original one, 5.23. The new one, 5.232. So we're talking 0.02 of an inch. So of course they're not going to be exactly the same, but I'm not considerably worried about it. So I don't know. Maybe we're at a conundrum now. Do I install the new one? Do I use the original one? I don't know. Yeah, I see no difference. I don't know. But at least now I'll have like something to put on the shelf. And just in case you guys are wondering if you want or need one of those things, that part number is 5501388, and the price was 20 bucks. So yeah, feel free, do whatever you want. You go to the Harley dealership and buy one of those, but I strongly suggest against it because it's quite literally just a piece of machined steel. So I mean, man, nothing's preventing you from making this yourself if you want to, but either way, for 20 bucks, just, I don't know, I feel like it couldn't hurt. But now I'm going to go ahead and flip this over, do the exact same procedure on the other side. I'm going to go ahead and flip this bad boy, So this is technically the right side. I'm gonna actually stand this up here. There we go. Now we got the pop. The rest of it should move along here. Come on now, you got to be getting close. There we go. Now we got a second bearing. We're all set. Well, now that we got the original bearings out, take a minute just to clean up all your crap. You know, put your kit back together. Like, we're not done with it. We're going to keep on using this kit to reinstall the new stuff. But at least as of right now. Now that we have these out, there is a super important thing that you guys need to know / see. I'll bring you in and show you the bore on the wheel. This right here is the side that I just did. So technically the right side of the motorcycle. And you can tell here because of the arrow on the tire right there, telling me which way it's spinning. So this is the right side of the bike. Now look at the depth of the bore here where the bearing can go. So this bearing is only, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch wide. And this bore is probably an inch, if not more deep. So it is possible to seat this bearing too far. Let's look at the other side. This right here is the left side of the motorcycle, or where this new ABS bearing is going to go. See the depth of this bore? It is different. It actually has a stop. So whenever we go to install the new ABS bearing, we're going to bottom that bearing out all the way into this bore, install the spacer tube, and then pull the other bearing to this one. That ensures that our bearing spacing is correct, and this is where it needs to be. So now that we have these things out, go ahead and take a minute and just clean these up. I mean, honestly, how often are you into the inner bore of your wheel where the wheel bearings go? So just clean this up, make sure there's no debris, and then we'll go ahead and get our new bearings ready for install. Now, whenever it comes to these ABS bearings, I know I'm preaching a lot here, but this is an important thing. So one side bearing that is the non-ABS, or the right side, is going to be pretty much identical freaking thing that you just took out. The ABS side bearing is the one that's different. So not only is it significantly bigger, like wider than the other ones, there is a ring or a ridge on it. And that helps you immediately know which side goes in, which side goes out. You guys can see here on the OD of the bearing, there is a ring. That is the inboard portion of the bearing. The blue or colored part will go into the wheel. And then this gold looking part, this is where that magnetic tone ring is. This needs to face the outside of the wheel. And even in the kit, they've included a little diagram. Hey guy, sensor side goes out, the groove side goes in. Now, as far as actually going back together, I need to bring you back in and show you the kit one more time. So here in the kit for install, we're essentially doing the exact same thing in reverse. See these guys on the right-hand side here? These are the installation pucks, if you want to call them. So we have our new bearing, and we're going to choose one of these. You notice how the standoffs on these are different diameters. They're for different style bearings. So for the particular one that we're using, This guy right here, the second one down in the kit, whatever. You see how it fits perfectly on the ID of the bearing. A little loose, but it's fine. This is what's going to be responsible for pressing the bearing into the wheel. You notice how the lip here on the edge is raised? That will put all of the pulling pressure of this installation tool onto the outer race of the bearing. So it's pushing this whole thing as one. So the resistance between the wheel and the bearing, that will be pressed on evenly, and we're not pushing on the inner side of the bearing like how we used to pull it. So this ensures a good install, and we're not going to damage the bearing in the process. Make sure you have everything put in correctly, like the tool put together. Just a little skim coat of oil here. Just a little bit to help the medicine go down. We're not trying to do anything or like actually lubricate the bearing. This should just help the process of it going in. And I'm telling you, a little skim coat here, just a little bit. We go ahead, start this in the bore by hand, and then we can go ahead and put the tool together. So the way this is going to work, after you just barely start, like it's just barely hanging there, choose the installation puck that you need, put the bolt through there, put the whole thing through the other side. This is going to hold everything together over here. Now we need to assemble the back side. Back here on the other side, we're going to use this big giant cup once again. Put that over here, and then there is a big giant thick flat washer. I'm going to throw that over top of this guy, and then put our hardware together so we can use this to pull. Tell you what, one of those wheel stud pullers would probably work great for this. Let me grab one. Have our big cup, wheel stud puller, and then a washer. And install another washer here, why not? It just takes up more space and should give us a little more room. Again, lubricate the threads. Now we can start putting this guy back together. There we go. Now, I know it looks like there's a lot going on here, but I've overcomplicated this process. It does not have to be like this. Go ahead and grab, where are they here? 2 18 mil wrenches, one to hold one side, one to crank on the other. Now, you guys should be able to see that bearing starting to pull in. I tell you what, let me move the camera so you can get a better look at it. Remember, when it comes to doing this stuff, slow and steady wins the race. Alrighty, and there we have it. She's bottomed out. We are good to go. Now you can remove your tool. Cool. Now that we got the ABS side in, which is the important one because that sets our depth. So you take that thing into the bore until it bottoms out. That's just crank till you can't crank no more, but don't break nothing, okay? So now we're on the other side. Make sure you install your spacer sleeve first, because if you forget to do this, you're going to have to pull your brand new bearing back out. So make sure you install your spacer tube, and then that sets the depth of how far the new bearing goes in on this side. We'll repeat the process and do the exact same thing. Got all that crap lined up. Go ahead and start pulling. There we go. She's seated up against that interior spacer, and that's all she wrote, man. Well, now I suppose that this is done. That is the project. Old bearings out, new bearings in. Make sure that everything spins when you have it in there. So that's one thing you need to take note to. Whenever you tighten up the second one to the first one, make sure that you don't kill it, because that spacer in between the bearings, like it pushes together. It's not that big of a deal because that's the way it's designed to. Like that spacer keeps the bearings where they are whenever the axle is tightened. But, you know, I like to snug up against that bearing but not crank it. So, you know, it's a feel thing. You will get better at it as you do it. But now we can rip the old wheel off, put the new wheel on. here we are, guys, all said and done. Take a look at that. I know it's nothing earth-shattering to do this. It's nothing new. Millions, hundreds, thousands of a lot of people have done this, but it's new to me, and this was a good deal, and I could not pass it up. So really, the only thing I'm kind of thinking now is like maybe like one of those full wraparound like Reaper fenders. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of need to stop spending money. But if you're a bike person, I don't need to tell you. It's just either way. Hopefully, you guys found this informative / useful. I know I kind of fumbled through it a little bit because like I've used different kits, and that was the first time for that one because I told you I just got it. But either way, it's super simple. Even like with me messing up putting crap together, it was still only 10 minutes. I know it doesn't come across that way in the video because it's all choppy and edited and everything. But I promise you, you got a head on your shoulders. You can figure that out and put it together. There is nothing to it. So you go on the interwebs, get yourself a good set of aftermarket bearings for way cheaper than you would for the Harley dealership, and do it yourself. Yeah, then you have the peace of mind that everything is done correctly because you did it. You know the spacing is done. You know everything's cleaned and lubricated, and you can check your brakes while you're in here. You can check clearances, put your axle back in, tighten things up, torque it to spec. It's just, I don't know if you guys are the same as me, but I really, really like doing stuff myself much more so than taking it somewhere, because even though you pay dealership prices and you're supposed to get like top-notch work, you still don't know how the work went. You know, I mean, you'd like to think that everything is good and top-notch quality because it's a dealership, but I don't know that. If I do stuff myself, I know exactly what happened. Like, God forbid something happens or something goes wrong and I have to fix it or take an action or something, at least I know how that was rectified and how it was done. So I don't know, it just gives me a little more peace of mind. So for dumb stuff like this, like changing your wheel bearings, by all means, dude, go ahead and do it yourself. And like I mentioned, check out all the links down in the description for everything I used here today. I will include the bearings and everything. So in the event that you have this, super easy. Click the link and get them. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this one and stick around because there's a whole bunch of crap on this thing that we're going to go over. So hopefully you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.